outside of getting a new ownership group, which was necessary and vital to the long-term stability and viability of the Bills franchise, most certainly in Buffalo, 2014 can best be summed up for the organization as being pointless. Absolutely pointless. A pointless 9-7 if there ever has been one. Whoopee, a winning record. Whoopee, guess what? For the 15th straight season, this organization still didn't get their asses in the playoffs. They sat there and gave up first and fourth round picks in this year's draft last year to move up just 5 selections to take a guy like Sammy Watkins when they could have just sat there maybe at pick 9 and ended up with Odell Beckham Jr. They sat there and benched EJ Manuel and ruined any chance he probably had of ever developing into the guy if he ever had a chance for the sake of Kyle Orton, so that way they could go 7-5 under his leadership, just so that way they could not make the playoffs. That way Kyle Orton could retire and you could have a head coach leave after the season and Doug Marrone. If there's ever been a pointless 9-7 season for an organization, it was the Buffalo Bills 2014. Just a shame. It's sad. But when you look back on this team's draft history, it hasn't been all that bad over the past few years. So, this could be a team that is close to breaking through and getting to that next level. So maybe they could turn 2014 into a positive, even though in a lot of ways it's kind of a pointless negative. You have first-round pick from 2011, Marcel Darius, as part of maybe the best defensive line in all of the National Football League. You've got their first-round pick from 2012, Stephon Gilmore. He's starting to finally show some stuff. Second-round pick from a couple of years ago, Cordy Glenn, has been solid. Sammy Watkins is most certainly going to be a hit. It's just a matter of the price that they paid in order to move up 5 slots in the draft last year in order to get him. Problem is they've had some misses. Former mid-round picks like TJ Graham didn't pan out. They pretty much got nothing out of their 2010 class, and they have a lot of questions. You look at the 2013 draft, the first 2 picks, EJ Manuel. What's he going to be? He hasn't really done much. Robert Woods, their second-round pick. Here's a guy with talent, but is it a matter of him just not having the best quarterback to get the most out of him, or is he a guy that's going to ultimately underproduce compared to his potential? Then you also have the question of the Sammy Watkins deal. Again, this is a team that gave up a first and fourth round pick to move up just in this year's draft, just to move up 5 picks from 9-4 in last year's draft at a time where most people were talking about this could be possibly the best wide receiver class ever. And as much as everybody was talking about Sammy Watkins, it wasn't so clear-cut that he was even the top option in that draft when you had guys like Mike Evans and Odell Beckham Jr. on the board. Is this Buffalo Bills organization going to look back at that deal 3 or 4 years from now and say, yeah, it was nice that we got Sammy Watkins, but what could we have done with Mike Evans or Odell Beckham Jr., let's say especially Beckham Jr., and we still had those first and fourth round picks in 2015? So, again, 2014, as I mentioned earlier, was a bit pointless for this organization. They benched EJ Manuel for a quarterback who is now retired. It was a knee-jerk, panic, reflex reactionary move by a coach that was trying to look out for his own best interest long-term. It was all about this year and nothing else. And then he ends up leaving any damn ways. So now in comes Rex Ryan. And the media loves this guy. And the fans are foolishly buying into the bullshit. And look, this is the danger of the media being allowed to set the narrative. Why in the bluest of blue fucks would anybody be excited about bringing in a guy who had 4 straight losing seasons? Why would anybody be excited about bringing in a guy that hasn't made the playoffs since 2010 in that same division? Why would anybody be excited about bringing in a guy that, yes, his team's matched up well against the Patriots, but ultimately they never beat him in the divisional race? Yes, they knocked him out of the playoffs one time, but that was one fluke in 6 seasons. Look at the Jets the past few years. You're happy about a guy who led a team to a 4-12 record last year. Holy Christ. Just because he says the right things, just because he's a bit off the wall and he's a character, doesn't mean that he's the right guy or he's a good choice or it's going to be a big successful move for the Bills. I don't understand this love affair that the media and certain fans have with Rex Ryan because I think it's largely unmerited and unfounded in reality. The reality is this guy hasn't been a very good producing NFL head coach. That's a fact. This is not an opinion of mine. This is not just me trying to piss people off or be contrarian. It's a fact. He has a career losing record in the division. A career losing record as an NFL head coach, period. It's a lateral move, if not a downgrade, if you ask me. But they've been active in the offseason. They traded Kiko Alonso for LaShawn McCoy, which I kind of understood and I still kind of don't. You know, their defense was already that good without Alonso, so did they really need him? Maybe, maybe not. But you bring in a LaShawn McCoy when you have a running back class that's so deep and loaded at the position in this year's draft, and then you sit there and give LaShawn McCoy a lot of money. Was that really that wise of a thing to do with a guy that has a lot of mileage on his NFL body already? They trade a couple of mid-late round picks for a guy like Matt Castle. You know, why are you bringing in Matt Castle? What do you think you're going to really win with Matt Castle potentially as your starting quarterback? They take a flyer on Percy Harvin, which makes some sense. They bring in Charles Clay because they needed a weapon at tight end, an upgrade over Scott Chandler. While Charles Clay might not be a pure-blooded tight end, more of an H-back than a pure tight end, he brings another weapon to that offense that so badly needed it. When you look at this Bills team again, you know, this is a team that I would expect to make some strides and some improvements, you know, kind of having that beginner's luck under Rex Ryan, and I expect him to be a playoff contender in 2015. I really do. But in terms of this draft, they still have some needs. You know, as much as everybody wants to crown Buffalo's ass, they're still not that good of a team, even though they went 9-7 last year. Obviously, they need a quarterback. You know, that's the biggest need of all. Especially if you're trying to contend in a division with Tom Brady and even Ryan Tannehill, you need something better than E.J. Manuel, or you need to bring somebody in that can force E.J. Manuel to be the guy that some in that organization envisioned 2 years ago when they drafted him in the first round. They could use some help on that offensive line inside, particularly at guard. They could use some help on that defense as well. They could use another safety. They could use a linebacker somewhere, whether inside or outside. They could use another tight end, a more traditional type of tight end to complement what you have in Charles Clay. But the biggest draft philosophy for the Buffalo Bills here to me is twofold, or threefold, I should say. Number one, don't get too crazy or try and do anything stupid to overcompensate for what happened with the Sammy Watkins trade last year. Number two is try to connect on the picks that you do have. And number three, maybe try to use this draft as a way to position yourself for the next year's draft. Maybe you take your second-round pick that you have this year and you trade it to a team for a third-rounder this year and perhaps a third-rounder next year. You do the same thing with your third-rounder this year. Take that, turn that into maybe a third-rounder this year and a third-rounder next year, or a fourth-rounder this year and a third-rounder next year, if that makes sense. Try to take what you have and turn it into some long-term currency, so that way you kind of figure out what you have with the Bills under Ryan in 2015, and then you can really start to get aggressive in 2016 going forward if you decide the timing is now to really make your move, make your strike, and try to overtake the New England Patriots in that division. They don't have a lot of draft pick ammunition, obviously. Losing that first pick, even though it was only pick 19, it's still a top 20 pick in the draft. So they have to do the best that they can considering the situation. It's not a doomsday scenario. They could still do themselves well by finding a couple key contributors that can come in right away and help out, but also accumulate some draft pick currency going forward. To me, if I'm running the Buffalo Bills, that's what I'm trying to do to make the best out of this situation in this year's draft. I'm trying to find a couple of guys that will fit what I need them to do and will come in and contribute immediately while trying to accumulate some additional draft pick currency for the 2016 draft.